There is a moment, just before midnight, when the world seems to hold its breath. The hum of the refrigerator fades. The distant sound of traffic dissolves into something softer, something almost like silence. And in that stillness you reach for your phone. Not because you need to, but because something whispers that you should. The screen illuminates your face in pale blue light, and there they are, 4 ones standing in a row like sentinels at the edge of a doorway. 1111, you have seen this before, perhaps dozens of times, perhaps hundreds. Each time a small flutter moves through your chest, recognition, wonder, or something older and harder to name. Across the world, in cities you will never visit and languages you will never speak, others are looking at their clocks at this very same moment, feeling that very same flutter. Some call it coincidence. Some call it a message. The old numerologists called it a master number, a frequency that vibrates at the threshold between the seen and unseen. But what if it is simpler than all of that, and stranger? What if these 4 glowing digits are an invitation, one that has been extended to humanity since we first learned to count the hours? Come, let us trace the origins of this quiet mystery together and see where the ones have been leading us all along. But before that, comment down below which country you are watching from. Long before the first digital clock blinked to life in a laboratory, long before electricity hummed through copper wires and illuminated our nights, humanity was already speaking to the universe in numbers. This conversation began not with words but with scratches on bone, tiny marks etched into ivory more than 30,000 years ago, perhaps tracking the swelling and waning of the moon, perhaps counting something we can no longer remember. What we do know is this. From our earliest days we sensed that numbers were more than mere tools for tallying sheep or measuring grain. They were a language, and the universe seemed to be speaking it back to us. In the sun-baked temples of ancient Babylon, priest astronomers lifted their eyes to the night sky and saw patterns written in starlight. They developed one of the first sophisticated number systems, base 60, which still echoes in our 60-minute hours and 360-degree circles. For these ancient scholars, numbers were not abstractions but living forces. They believed that the movements of planets corresponded to earthly events, that the numerical values hidden in names could reveal destiny. An Assyrian inscription from the 8th century before the Common Era records that King Sargon II ordered the walls of his capital city built to a length of 16,283 cubits, a measurement chosen specifically to match the numerical value of his own name. The king understood, as his people understood, that numbers carried power beyond their quantity. But it was in ancient Greece, in the 6th century BC, that the philosophy of numbers found its most famous voice. On the island of Samos, a child was born who would grow to become one of the most influential thinkers in human history. His name was Pythagoras, and though we remember him today for his theorem about triangles, his true passion lay in something far more mystical. Pythagoras believed that numbers were the fundamental building blocks of reality itself, that beneath the chaos of the material world lay a perfect mathematical harmony, if only one knew how to listen for it. The stories tell us that Pythagoras traveled widely in his youth, studying with Egyptian priests and Babylonian magi, absorbing the numerical wisdom of older civilizations. When he returned to the Greek world, he founded not merely a school but a way of life. His followers, the Pythagoreans, lived according to strict principles. They shared all possessions, practiced vegetarianism, observed periods of ritual silence, and above all, they revered numbers as sacred. To them, each number possessed its own character, its own vibration, its own hidden meaning. 1 represented unity and the source of all things. 2 embodied duality and opposition. 3 symbolized harmony, the reconciliation of opposites. And so it continued. Each number a key to understanding the cosmos. The Pythagoreans made a remarkable discovery that seemed to confirm their beliefs. They found that musical harmony, the pleasing relationship between notes that makes music beautiful rather than discordant, could be expressed in simple numerical ratios. A string divided in half produces a note 1 octave higher than the whole string. Divide it into thirds, and you create a perfect fifth. The beauty that humans heard in music was, at its root, mathematical. If something as intangible as beauty could be reduced to number, what else might numbers reveal? The Pythagoreans came to believe that the entire universe was constructed according to numerical principles, that reality itself was, in essence, a kind of cosmic music, It was within this tradition that certain numbers came to be regarded as possessing special significance. Among the most powerful were what later practitioners would call the master numbers, 11, 20, 2, and 33. Unlike other double digits, these were not to be reduced to single figures through addition. They stood apart, vibrating at a higher frequency, carrying meanings too complex to simplify. 11 in particular was seen as the number of intuition and spiritual insight, a bridge between the earthly and the divine. It represented the moment when the ordinary mind touches something beyond itself, when the veil between worlds grows thin. The wisdom of Pythagoras did not remain confined to his secretive brotherhood. His ideas filtered through the centuries, absorbed by Plato, transformed by Neoplatonist philosophers in Alexandria and Athens, woven into the mystical traditions of Judaism through the Kabbalah. In the Hebrew tradition, the practice of gematria, assigning numerical values to letters and finding hidden meanings in the sums, became a powerful tool for interpreting scripture. Every word in the Torah could be transformed into a number, and numbers that matched might reveal secret connections between concepts that seemed unrelated on the surface. The universe, it seemed, had written itself in code, and the faithful could spend lifetimes learning to read it. Christianity, too, inherited this fascination with sacred numbers. The early church fathers found numerical symbolism throughout Scripture: 3 for the Trinity, 7 for divine completion, 12 for the apostles and the tribes of Israel, 40 for periods of trial and transformation. St. Augustine himself wrote that numbers were a universal language offered by God to humanity, a confirmation of truth for those wise enough to perceive it. Yet the Church also grew suspicious of numerological practices, associating them at times with divination and pagan magic. In 325 of the Common Era, following the Council of Nicaea, certain mystical practices fell under official disapproval. Numerology retreated into the shadows, kept alive by alchemists, mystics, and those who sought wisdom outside the boundaries of orthodox teaching. Through the medieval period and into the Renaissance, the secret study of numbers continued in hidden corners of European intellectual life. Scholars like Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa wrote extensively on occult philosophy, mapping letters to numbers and numbers to cosmic forces. The tradition passed through generations, sometimes flourishing openly, sometimes surviving only in coded manuscripts and whispered teachings. And all the while the number 11 retained its special status, a threshold number, one more than the complete 10, one less than the perfect 12. It was the number of excess and lack, of transition and incompleteness, of standing at the edge of something not yet fully formed. What none of these ancient practitioners could have imagined was the world that awaited their teachings. They could not have dreamed of a future in which nearly every human being would carry a glowing rectangle in their pocket, a device that would display the time in crisp digital numerals dozens of times each day. They could not have foreseen how their mystical number, 11, doubled into 1111, would appear on screens around the globe, catching the attention of millions who had never heard of Pythagoras or gematria or master numbers. Yet in some strange way perhaps they did foresee it. Perhaps they understood that the language of numbers would endure, that it would adapt and evolve, that it would find new ways to speak to each generation. The ancient conversation between humanity and numbers never truly ended. It simply waited for new voices to join it. In bedrooms and kitchens, in office cubicles and late-night subway cars, people began to notice something curious. They were seeing the same number over and over again. 4 ones in a row, appearing on digital clocks and receipts, on license plates and timestamps. At first, they dismissed it as coincidence, but the appearances continued, and something in them began to wonder, what if the universe was trying to say something? What if the old numerologist had been right all along? The question hung in the air like the last note of an unfinished melody, and across the world people began to listen. There is a peculiar intimacy in the way we check the time. We glance at our wrists, our phones, the corner of our computer screens, sometimes without even meaning to. A gesture so automatic, it barely registers as conscious thought. Yet this simple act connects us to one of humanity's most profound and persistent desires, the longing to measure the passage of our days, to hold time in our hands even as it slips forever through our fingers. For most of human history, Reading the time required interpretation, a kind of translation between the position of shadows or hands and the abstract concept of hours and minutes. But in the second half of the 20th century, something changed. The clock learned to speak directly, in glowing numerals that required no interpretation at all, and in that transformation a new kind of magic became possible. The story of the digital clock begins not with a sudden invention but with a slow accumulation of ideas, each building upon the last like notes in a rising melody. In 1883, an Austrian engineer named Josef Paul Weber created something remarkable, a pocket watch that displayed the time not through rotating hands, but through small windows that revealed printed numerals on rotating discs. He called it the jump hour mechanism, and though it was still powered by springs and gears, it represented a fundamental shift in how humans might perceive time. Instead of reading the angle of hands against a numbered dial, the wearer could simply look at the digits themselves. The numbers had stepped forward, announcing themselves directly. Paul Weber's invention found its way into pocket watches produced by respected manufacturers, and the principle appeared in wristwatches by the 1920s. But these were still mechanical devices, elegant curiosities rather than harbingers of revolution. The true transformation awaited the age of electronics, that era of vacuum tubes and transistors, of circuits etched in silicon, of light itself bent to human will. The 20th century was gathering its forces, preparing to illuminate the world in ways no previous generation could have imagined. The 1950s witnessed the first stirrings of what was to come. In 1956, an American inventor named D.E.I. Protzman filed a patent for a digital alarm clock, a device that used mechanical digits controlled by electrical motors. It was a hybrid creature, straddling the line between the old world of gears and the new world of electrons. But the true revolution required a different kind of light altogether, light that could be summoned at will, shaped into numerals, and extinguished just as easily. That light came in the form of the LED, the light-emitting diode, a tiny semiconductor that glowed when electricity passed through it. The development of practical LEDs in the 1960s opened a doorway that inventors rushed through with eager hands. In 1970, the Hamilton Watch Company unveiled a prototype that would capture the imagination of the world. Created for Stanley Kubrick's visionary film about humanity's future among the stars, this glowing digital clock appeared on screen as a symbol of things to come, a future in which time itself would be rendered in pure light. The public saw those red numerals gleaming in the darkness of a spacecraft, and something in the collective imagination shifted. The future, it seemed, would tell time differently. 2 years later, Hamilton released the Pulsar, the first commercially available digital wristwatch with an LED display. Encased in 18-karat gold and priced at $2,100, a small fortune at the time, it was a luxury item, a status symbol for those who wished to wear the future on their wrists. To see the time, the wearer pressed a button, and glowing red digits appeared as if summoned from nowhere. The display could not remain constantly illuminated. The power requirements were too great. But that intermittent revelation only added to the mystique. Time was there, waiting in the darkness, ready to speak when called upon. The floodgates opened. Throughout the 1970s, digital timepieces proliferated at an astonishing rate. By 1975, more than 80 different models of digital watches crowded the market. Prices tumbled as manufacturing improved, and what had been a luxury became commonplace. The introduction of LCD technology, liquid crystal displays that required far less power than LEDs, made digital watches practical for everyday use. No longer did one need to press a button. The time simply appeared patient and persistent, whenever one cared to look. Digital clocks invaded the home as well. They appeared on nightstands and kitchen counters, their glowing faces visible across darkened rooms. They embedded themselves in appliances, ovens and microwaves, VCRs and stereos, each device suddenly possessed of its own small voice announcing the hour. The bedroom became a constellation of tiny lights, each one murmuring the same message in slightly different colors. Where once a household might have contained a single clock, Now dozens of digital timepieces populated every room, each one capable of displaying that curious sequence of 4 ones. Consider what this meant for the human experience of time. With analog clocks, certain moments held no special visual significance. 11:11 on a traditional clock face looks much like 11:12 or 11:10, hands pointing in a particular direction, requiring a moment of mental calculation to interpret. But on a digital display, 11:11 is unmistakable. 4 identical numerals standing in a row, a visual pattern that catches the eye with its perfect symmetry. The digital clock had created something new, time that could surprise us with its appearance, moments that looked different from the ones that came before and after. The 1980s and 90s saw digital displays become utterly ubiquitous. Car boards glowed with the time. Office buildings installed digital clocks in lobbies and conference rooms. Schools replaced their old analog clocks with digital models, and a generation of children grew up reading time as a sequence of numerals rather than a position of hands. The VCR became a cultural joke precisely because so many households left its clock perpetually flashing 1200, a small admission of defeat in the face of technological complexity. But for those who did set their clocks, the digital display became a constant companion, a presence noticed and unnoticed dozens of times each day. And then came the device that would change everything, the mobile phone. At first, these were simple tools for communication, their small screens displaying little more than phone numbers and signal strength. But as technology advanced, the mobile phone evolved into something far more intimate. The smartphone, that glowing rectangle that now accompanies nearly every human in the developed world, became our constant companion. We carry it in our pockets, place it beside our beds, reach for it in moments of boredom or anxiety or simple habit. And every time we wake its screen, there is the time, displayed in crisp digital numerals impossible to ignore. The average person now checks their phone dozens of times each day. Some studies suggest the number exceeds 100 for heavy users. Each glance is an opportunity for the clock to speak, for a particular arrangement of digits to catch the eye. And among all the possible times that might appear, certain combinations began to stand out. Repeated numbers, 11:11, 12:12, 3:33, possessed a visual distinctiveness that made them memorable. Where once such moments might have passed unnoticed on an analog dial, now they announced themselves with quiet insistence. Something strange began to happen. People started noticing when they looked at the clock at 11:11, not because they intended to, but because some subtle force seemed to draw their gaze at precisely that moment. They would be working at their desks, lost in thought, and something would compel them to glance at the corner of their screen. 11:11. They would wake in the night, fumbling for their phone, and there it would be. 11:11. At first, they dismissed it as coincidence, but the coincidences accumulated, and dismissal became more difficult. In internet forums and casual conversations, people began to share their experiences. They discovered they were not alone. Across the globe, strangers were reporting the same phenomenon, an uncanny tendency to notice 11:11, a feeling that the number was following them, appearing far more often than chance should allow. Some felt unsettled by these experiences. Others felt comforted, as if the universe were sending them a secret message, a gentle reminder that they were not forgotten. The digital clock, that humble descendant of Paul Weber's jump hour mechanism, had become a medium through which something mysterious seemed to communicate. The technology itself was neutral, of course. Digital clocks bore no intention, carried no message from beyond. They simply displayed the time, indifferent to who was watching or what that watcher might feel. Yet the very neutrality of the technology made the phenomenon more puzzling, not less. If the clocks themselves meant nothing, why did so many people feel that something meaningful was happening? Why did 4 identical digits glowing on a screen produce such a powerful sense of recognition and wonder? Perhaps the answer lay not in the clocks at all, but in the consciousness that perceived them. Perhaps the digital display had simply made visible something that had always been present, the human longing to find pattern and meaning in the flow of time. The ancient numerologists would have understood. They too sought messages in numbers, significance in sequences. The medium had changed, but the conversation continued. In glowing red and soft blue, in the pale light of 1,000 million screens, the numbers kept appearing, and the world kept watching, waiting to see what they might mean. In the quiet hours of a Virginia evening in 1986, a woman sat in meditation, waiting for something she could not quite name. Her given name was Solara Antara Amamara, though she had not always been called this. Like many who find themselves drawn to spiritual seeking, she had undergone a transformation, shedding an old identity to embrace one that felt truer to her awakening self. What came to her in those silent hours would eventually ripple outward across the world, touching millions of lives and forever linking the number 1111 to the realm of the sacred. Solara had founded an organization called Starborn Unlimited, a gathering place for those who sensed that humanity was approaching a great turning point. The late 1980s hummed with such anticipation. The harmonic convergence of 1987 had drawn thousands to sacred sites around the globe, united in the belief that a new era of consciousness was dawning. Ancient Mayan calendars, quantum physics, channeled messages from celestial beings, all seemed to point toward an imminent shift, a moment when the old world would give way to something luminous and unknown. It was into this atmosphere of expectation that Solara introduced her revelation about 1111. According to her teachings, 1111 was not merely a number but a doorway, a cosmic portal through which awakened souls might pass into higher dimensions of being. She spoke of the number as an activation code, a signal embedded in the fabric of reality that would trigger remembrance in those who were ready to receive it. When you saw 1111 on a clock or a receipt or a license plate, it was not coincidence. It was a call from beyond the veil, a reminder of who you truly were before you forgot yourself in the density of earthly existence. The universe itself was tapping you on the shoulder, inviting you to wake up. The ideas spread through workshops and books, through word of mouth among communities already primed to receive them. Solara taught that a great activation would occur on January 11, 1992, a date that could be written as 191999192, containing within it the sacred sequence. She called for 144,000 participants to gather at sacred sites around the world, to perform synchronized meditations and sacred dances that would help anchor the energies of the new consciousness on Earth. The number 144,000 itself carried significance, echoing the sealed servants mentioned in the Book of Revelation, suggesting that those who answered the call were part of something ancient and prophesied. That January day arrived cold and clear in many parts of the Northern Hemisphere. In Egypt, beneath the ancient gaze of the pyramids, groups gathered to chant and sway. In Australia, at sites sacred to indigenous peoples, participants performed the movements Solara had taught. In small towns and large cities across dozens of countries, people closed their eyes at 11:11 in the morning and 11:11 at night, sending their intentions into the great web of consciousness that they believed connected all living things. Whether the doorway opened in the way Solara had described remains a matter of personal belief. But something had undeniably shifted. The number 1111 had entered the collective imagination in a new way, carrying with it a freight of meaning it had never possessed before. The phenomenon might have remained confined to New Age circles had it not found an unexpected champion. Uri Geller, the Israeli psychic famous for his apparent ability to bend spoons with his mind, became fascinated with 1111. Geller had been a public figure since the 1970s, appearing on television programs around the world, demonstrating feats that skeptics dismissed as sleight of hand and believers hailed as evidence of untapped human potential. His celebrity gave him a platform, and he used it to speak about the strange pattern he had noticed in his own life, the persistent appearance of 1111 at moments of significance. On his website and in interviews, Geller shared his observations with characteristic enthusiasm. He noted that many pivotal events in history seemed connected to the number 11. The First World War had ended on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The Berlin Wall fell on November 9, 1982, a date that in certain numerical analyses revealed hidden 11s. He pointed to birth dates and death dates, to flight numbers and building addresses, weaving an intricate tapestry of correspondence that suggested 11 was woven into the very fabric of human destiny. Whether one found these connections compelling or coincidental, they captured attention. Geller's audience was vast, and his fascination with 1111 introduced the concept to people who had never encountered Solara's teachings. The 1990s saw the rise of the Internet, that great network of networks that would transform how humans shared information and found community. In the early days of the World Wide Web, forums and message boards became gathering places for those who sought others like themselves. And among the many topics that drew passionate discussion, 1111 began to appear with surprising frequency. People posted their stories, how they kept seeing the number, how it appeared at meaningful moments, how they felt something shift inside them when those 4 digits caught their eye. They found validation in discovering they were not alone, that this strange experience was shared by strangers across the globe. A pattern emerged in these accounts, one that would repeat countless times in the years to come. The experience typically began without warning. A person would notice 1111 on a clock, perhaps think nothing of it, then notice it again the next day, and the next. The appearances would seem to increase in frequency, clustering around moments of decision or emotional intensity. Many described a feeling of being watched over, guided, accompanied by some benevolent presence that communicated through this simple numerical sequence. Others felt unsettled, wondering if they were losing their grip on reality or being targeted by forces they did not understand. In Japan, people whispered about the phenomenon in terms shaped by their own cultural context, finding resonances with traditional beliefs about auspicious numbers and moments of spiritual significance. In Brazil, the experience merged with spiritist traditions that emphasized communication between the living and the spirit world. In Germany, some connected their 1111 sightings to the country's deep history with that date, November 11th marking not only the end of the First World War, but also, at precisely 11 minutes past 11, the traditional start of carnival season, when ordinary rules are suspended and a different kind of consciousness takes hold. Across cultures, the experience found local expressions, adapting itself to the symbolic languages already present in each society. The early 2000s brought new voices to the conversation. A woman named Doreen Virtue, trained in psychology and drawn to spiritual teaching, began publishing books about what she called angel numbers. Her work proposed that guardian angels and spiritual guides communicated with humans through numerical sequences, each combination carrying its own specific message. 1111, in her interpretation, was among the most powerful of these signals, a sign that angels were near, that one's thoughts were manifesting rapidly, that one should pay attention to the contents of one's mind at the moment of seeing. Her book, Angel Numbers 101, became a touchstone for a generation of spiritual seekers, offering a systematic guide to interpreting the numerical messages that seem to appear everywhere in daily life. Virtue's framework gave people a language for their experiences. When they saw 1111, they now had a ready explanation. The angels were speaking. When they saw 220, 2 or 333, they could consult her guides and discover what the celestial beings were trying to convey. The practice spread through social media as the platforms emerged, with users sharing their number sightings and interpretations. A visual language developed, screenshots of clocks, timestamps on messages, receipts with meaningful totals, all shared as evidence of ongoing divine communication. The phenomenon had become participatory, a shared game of cosmic significance in which anyone might play. Yet even as angel numbers entered mainstream spiritual culture, Doreen Virtue herself underwent a transformation that surprised many of her followers. In 2017, she announced her conversion to Christianity and renounced her previous work, declaring that angel numbers and other New Age practices had led her away from biblical truth. She removed her content from circulation and urged her followers to turn to Scripture instead. The announcement sent shockwaves through communities that had built their spiritual lives around her teachings. Some felt betrayed, others respected her journey while continuing their own practices. The angel number interpretations she had popularized, meanwhile, continued to spread, taken up by new teachers and adapted for new audiences. The story of 1111 had become too large to be contained by any single teacher or tradition. It had taken on a life of its own, propagating through digital networks, adapting to local cultures, finding new expressions with each passing year. Young people who had never heard of Solara or Uri Geller or Doreen Virtue nonetheless reported the experience of seeing 1111 everywhere, feeling that flutter of recognition, wondering what it might mean. The phenomenon had become self-sustaining, a modern myth in the process of formation, drawing on ancient ideas about the significance of numbers while clothing itself in the glowing garments of digital technology. Some would say that what spread was merely an idea, a meme in the original sense of the word, a unit of cultural information replicating itself through human minds. Others would say that what spread was an awakening, a genuine spiritual opening that the modern world had made possible through its technologies of connection. Perhaps both were true. Perhaps the boundary between idea and awakening was less solid than it appeared. The ancients believed that numbers held power, that to name something was to call it into being. In speaking of 1111, in sharing experiences and attributing meaning, humanity might have been participating in an act of collective creation, calling into existence the very phenomenon it sought to understand. The doorway, whether metaphor or reality, stood open, and through it, seekers continued to pass, each one carrying their own questions into the luminous unknown. In a basement laboratory in Minnesota in 1994, a man named Terry Mullen was puzzling over a peculiar coincidence. He had recently encountered the name Baader Meinhof, a West German militant group from the 1970s, in a conversation with a friend. The following day, by pure chance, he came across a newspaper article mentioning the very same group, an organization that had faded from public attention decades earlier. The timing struck him as remarkable, almost eerie. Why should this obscure name appear twice in his life within 24 hours, after years of never hearing it at all? Mullen wrote a letter to the St. Paul Pioneer Press describing his experience, and something unexpected happened. Readers responded in droves, sharing their own stories of similar occurrences. They had learned a new word, and suddenly heard it everywhere. They had noticed a particular model of car and found it appearing on every street. They had thought of a long-lost friend only to receive a phone call from that very person. The newspaper, recognizing it had touched something universal, gave the phenomenon a name, the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. And in doing so, it offered a window into a different way of understanding why so many people seemed to see 1111 everywhere they looked. The human brain is a pattern-seeking organ of extraordinary sophistication. From the moment we open our eyes each morning, we are bombarded with sensory information, colors and shapes, sounds and textures, an overwhelming flood of data that would paralyze us if we tried to process it all consciously. The brain's solution is elegant and ruthless. It filters. It decides, largely without our awareness, what deserves attention and what can be safely ignored. This filtering process is shaped by many factors: novelty, emotional significance, relevance to our current goals, but among the most powerful is simple familiarity. Once something has entered our awareness, the brain becomes primed to notice it again. This is the engine that drives the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, which psychologists would later call the frequency illusion. When we encounter something new, a word, a concept, a number, our brain tags it as noteworthy. The next time that thing appears in our environment, we notice it, where before it would have slipped past unregistered. Each subsequent encounter reinforces the pattern, strengthening our impression that this thing is appearing more frequently than before. In reality, the frequency has not changed. What has changed is our attention. A Stanford linguistics professor named Arnold Zwicky gave the phenomenon its scientific name in 2005, distinguishing between two related effects. The frequency illusion is the impression that something appears more often after we first notice it. The recency illusion is the belief that something we have only recently become aware of is itself recent, that a word we just learned must be a new coinage, that a trend we just noticed must be newly emerged. Both illusions stem from the same root, the brain's tendency to mistake changes in attention for changes in the world. Consider how this might apply to the experience of seeing 1111. A person hears about the significance of this number, perhaps from a friend, perhaps from a social media post, perhaps from stumbling across an article late at night. The information enters their awareness, tagged by the brain as interesting, potentially meaningful. The next time they happen to glance at a clock displaying 1111, they notice it. A small thrill passes through them. There it is, just as promised. They begin to watch for it, consciously or unconsciously. And because they are watching, they see it more often. Not because it appears more frequently, but because their attention has been sharpened to detect it. The confirmation bias compounds the effect. We tend to remember the instances that confirm our beliefs and forget those that contradict them. The person who believes 1111 is significant will remember each time they see it, perhaps recording it in a journal or sharing it with friends. The dozens of times they glance at the clock and see 10:47 or 11:18 or 12:03 fade from memory, unremarkable and unremarked. Over time, a skewed mental record accumulates, a collection of meaningful sightings against a forgotten background of ordinary moments. The pattern seems undeniable, even though it may be largely constructed by the very mind that perceives it. There is another concept that sheds light on this experience, one with a more evocative name: apophenia. Coined by a German psychiatrist in 1958, apophenia refers to the tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated things. It is the experience of seeing faces in clouds, messages in coincidences, patterns in random noise. In its mild forms, apophenia is universal and often delightful, the basis for much of human creativity and the source of countless small pleasures. In its extreme forms, it can become pathological, leading to delusions of reference in which every passing car and overheard conversation seems laden with personal significance. The capacity for apophenia appears to be deeply rooted in human cognition, likely serving important evolutionary functions. Our ancestors who saw patterns quickly, who noticed the subtle signs of a predator's presence or the markers of a promising hunting ground, were more likely to survive and reproduce. The cost of false positives was relatively low. Mistaking a shadow for a leopard meant only a moment of unnecessary fear. The cost of false negatives could be fatal. And so we evolved to be pattern seekers, to err on the side of seeing connections even when none exist. In the modern world, this ancient tendency plays out in new contexts. We see patterns in stock market fluctuations and sports statistics, in political events and personal relationships. We find meaning in coincidences, significance in synchronicities. And when four identical digits appear on a digital clock, something in us responds, not because we have consciously decided to find it meaningful, but because our brains are wired to notice precisely this kind of pattern. Yet to explain the mechanism behind an experience is not necessarily to explain it away. The person who understands the frequency illusion may still feel a flutter when they see 1111. The knowledge that confirmation bias shapes our memories does not prevent us from feeling that certain moments are special, that certain patterns carry weight. We are not purely rational beings, calculating probabilities and adjusting our beliefs accordingly. We are creatures of feeling and intuition, of story and symbol. The patterns we perceive shape our experience of the world, regardless of their ultimate origin. There is wisdom in both perspectives, the psychological and the mystical, and perhaps the deepest wisdom lies in holding them together without forcing a resolution. The frequency illusion is real. Studies have demonstrated it repeatedly under controlled conditions. People genuinely do notice things more often after first becoming aware of them. This is not superstition but documented fact, a feature of how human attention operates. At the same time, the experience of meaningful coincidence is also real, not as an objective feature of the external world, but as a subjective feature of human consciousness. To dismiss such experiences as mere illusion is to miss something important about what it means to be human. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist whose ideas have shaped so much of modern spirituality, spent decades grappling with exactly this tension. He noticed that his patients often reported striking coincidences, dreams that seemed to predict future events, thoughts that aligned mysteriously with external occurrences. Rather than dismissing these as statistical flukes or symptoms of disordered thinking, Jung took them seriously as psychological phenomena worthy of study. He developed the concept of synchronicity to describe what he called meaningful coincidences, events that were connected not by cause and effect but by meaning. Jung's formulation was careful and nuanced, though it has often been simplified in popular accounts. He did not claim that synchronicities were supernatural interventions or messages from beyond. Rather, he proposed that the human psyche and the external world might be connected in ways that our usual categories of causation fail to capture. A meaningful coincidence, in his view, occurred when an internal psychological state corresponded with an external event in a way that felt significant to the person experiencing it. Like his famous account of a patient describing a dream about a golden scarab at the very moment a scarab-like beetle appeared at his window. The parallel to the 1111 phenomenon is striking. People report seeing the number at moments of emotional intensity or important decision, precisely the conditions under which, according to Jung, synchronicities are most likely to occur. They feel that the appearance of the number is connected to their inner state, that it carries a message relevant to their situation. Whether this connection exists objectively or is created by the perceiving mind may be less important than the fact that it is experienced as real, that it shapes behavior and feeling, that it becomes part of how people navigate their lives. Modern psychology has largely set aside Jung's more speculative ideas, focusing instead on the cognitive mechanisms that produce the sense of meaningful coincidence. But the questions Jung raised have not gone away. What is the relationship between mind and world? How do we explain the uncanny feeling that sometimes accompanies coincidence? Is there a form of meaning that exists outside the chains of cause and effect? These questions resist easy answers, and perhaps that is as it should be. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved but to be lived with, held gently in the space between knowing and not knowing. The person who sees 1111 stands at this crossroads. They can choose the path of skeptical explanation, understanding their experience as a product of attention and memory, pattern seeking and confirmation bias. They can choose the path of mystical interpretation, embracing the number as a sign from angels or the universe or their own higher self. Or they can walk a middle way, acknowledging both the psychological reality of the frequency illusion and the experiential reality of felt meaning, allowing the two to coexist without demanding that one triumph over the other. Perhaps this is what the number offers, in the end, not an answer but an invitation to wonder about the nature of mind and world, attention and meaning, the patterns we find and the patterns we create. The digital clock blinks onward, indifferent to our interpretations. But we are not indifferent. We are meaning makers, storytellers, seekers of pattern in the stream of time. And as long as we remain so, the numbers will continue to speak to us, in whatever language we are prepared to hear. She was driving home from a hospital where her mother lay dying when she first noticed it. The dashboard clock read 11:11, and something in her chest tightened, not with grief, which had become a constant companion, but with something else, recognition, perhaps, or the faint whisper of comfort in a world that had grown unbearably heavy. She did not know then that this moment would mark the beginning of a strange new chapter in her life, one in which 4 simple digits would become a thread connecting her to something she could not name but could not deny. This is how the stories often begin. Not with seekers who go looking for signs, but with ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances, moments of loss or transition, times when the familiar structures of life have crumbled, and the soul stands exposed to winds it never knew existed. The woman at the hospital did not believe in angel numbers. She had never heard of Solara, or synchronicity, or the frequency illusion. She was simply a daughter losing her mother, navigating the terrible geography of grief. And into that landscape, the number appeared. She began to see it everywhere, on receipts and license plates, on the timestamps of text messages from concerned friends, on the microwave when she heated the meals that neighbors left on her doorstep. Each appearance felt like a small tap on the shoulder, a gentle reminder that she was not alone in her sorrow. She did not tell anyone at first, afraid of seeming foolish or unhinged. But in the quiet hours after the funeral, when sleep would not come and the house felt impossibly empty, she found herself typing into a search engine, "Why do I keep seeing 1111?" What she discovered astonished her. Thousands of people, hundreds of thousands, had asked the same question. Forums and blog posts overflowed with testimonies from strangers who described experiences nearly identical to her own. They had seen the number during divorces and job losses, during pregnancies and spiritual awakenings, during the ordinary Tuesday afternoons that somehow felt charged with invisible significance. They spoke of feeling watched over, guided, accompanied by presences they could not see but somehow sensed. Reading their words in the blue glow of her laptop screen, she felt the loneliness of grief recede, just slightly. She was part of something larger than herself, a community of wanderers scattered across the globe, all looking at their clocks at the same impossible moment. The testimonies vary in their details but share a common emotional core. A young man in Sao Paulo described seeing 1111 during the months he spent questioning his faith, each appearance feeling like an invitation to keep searching rather than surrender to doubt. A retired teacher in Edinburgh recalls how the number began appearing after her husband's death, always at moments when she was thinking of him, as if he were finding ways to signal his continued presence. A teenager in Seoul posts anonymously about seeing 1111 during her struggles with anxiety, describing how the number has become a kind of anchor, a reminder to breathe and trust that things will be okay. In online spaces dedicated to the phenomenon, people share not only their experiences but also their interpretations. Some embrace the angel number framework, consulting guides to decipher the specific message being conveyed. 1111, they explain, is a sign of spiritual awakening, a signal that your thoughts are manifesting rapidly and you should focus on what you truly desire. Others draw on different traditions, numerology, astrology, the teachings of various spiritual masters, to construct meanings that resonate with their existing beliefs. Still others resist interpretation altogether, preferring to dwell in the mystery without reducing it to any single explanation. What emerges from these countless testimonies is not a unified doctrine but a shared sensibility. The people who notice 1111 tend to be those who are open to the possibility of meaning beyond the material, who sense that the universe might be more responsive and communicative than conventional worldviews allow. They are often going through periods of change or challenge, times when the established narratives of their lives have broken down and new stories are struggling to emerge. The number becomes a companion in this liminal space, a constant amid flux, a small light in the darkness of uncertainty. There are skeptics among them too, people who notice the pattern and struggle to make sense of it within a rationalist framework. They know about the frequency illusion and confirmation bias. They understand that the human brain is wired to find patterns, that memory is selective, that coincidences are statistically inevitable given enough opportunities, and yet the experience persists, stubbornly resistant to explanation. They see the number and feel something, even as their rational minds insist there is nothing to feel. This tension between knowing and feeling, between explanation and experience, runs through many of the testimonies, a thread of honest perplexity that resists easy resolution. A survey conducted in the United States found that the practice of making a wish at 1111 is surprisingly widespread, particularly among younger generations. Among women between 18 and 24 years of age, more than 4 in 10 reported making a wish when they see the time display those 4 digits. The numbers decline with age, but even among older demographics, a significant minority participate in this small ritual of hope. The practice has become a cultural touchstone, referenced in songs and social media posts, a shared gesture that transcends the boundaries between believers and skeptics, the spiritual and the secular. The wishes themselves reveal something tender about the human heart. People wish for love and healing, for success and safety, for the well-being of those they cherish. They wish for things they are embarrassed to say aloud, hopes too fragile to expose to the harsh light of ordinary conversation. The moment of 1111 becomes a protected space, a tiny sanctuary in the rush of daily life where it is permissible to want things, to ask for things, to believe, even if only for an instant, that the universe might be listening. Whether or not the wishes come true is almost beside the point. What matters is the act of wishing itself, the permission to hope. Social media has transformed how the phenomenon is shared and experienced. On platforms where images flow in endless streams, screenshots of 11/11 have become a genre unto themselves. Users post photos of their phone screens, their car dashboards, their oven clocks, all displaying the sacred sequence, often accompanied by emojis of prayer hands or sparkling stars. The posts accumulate likes and comments from others who have seen the same thing, creating a sense of collective participation in something meaningful. The phenomenon has become a form of digital folk practice, evolving and spreading through the networks that connect billions of human beings. Among young people, 11/11 has taken on additional meanings shaped by the cultures of social media. On certain platforms, sending a message or image at exactly 11/11 has become a way of expressing romantic interest, a digital equivalent of the old practice of sending flowers or writing love letters. The implication is clear: you are the one I think of at this magical moment, the wish I make when the clock aligns. The number has become a language of affection, a way of saying something important without having to say it directly. In a world where sincerity can feel risky, where vulnerability is often masked by irony, 11/11 offers a safe container for genuine feeling. The stories also carry shadows. Some people report that their 11/11 experiences began during periods of mental health crisis, times when the boundaries between self and world felt dangerously porous. For these individuals, the number's persistent appearance was not comforting but alarming, a sign that something was wrong with their perception of reality. Mental health professionals note that an excessive focus on patterns and signs can sometimes indicate conditions that benefit from treatment. The line between healthy openness to meaning and pathological pattern seeking is not always clear, and the phenomenon of 11/11 straddles that line in ways that merit thoughtful consideration. Yet for most who experience it, the number seems to bring more comfort than distress. It offers a sense of connection in an age of isolation, a feeling that one is part of something larger than the individual self. In a world that can feel random and indifferent, 11/11 suggests the possibility of hidden order, of messages waiting to be received, of a universe that notices and responds. Whether this possibility is real or imagined may matter less than the fact that it is felt, that it shapes experience, influences behavior, and provides a framework for making sense of life's uncertainties. The testimonies continue to accumulate, a growing archive of human experience at the threshold between the ordinary and the mysterious. Each story is unique in its details, yet connected to all the others by the common thread of those 4 digits. A construction worker in Texas sees 11/11 on his lunch break and thinks of his grandmother, who always said that angels watch over us. A college student in Mumbai notices the number during exam season and takes it as encouragement to keep studying. A nurse finishing a night shift glances at the clock as she removes her scrubs and feels for just a moment that her exhausting work is seen and valued by something beyond her patients and colleagues. These are small moments, easily dismissed, quickly forgotten in the rush of daily life. Yet they accumulate into something larger, a quiet testimony to the human hunger for meaning, for connection, for the sense that we are not alone in the vastness of existence. The clock ticks forward, indifferent to our hopes and fears. But in the moment of 11/11, something pauses. The world holds its breath, and for an instant, anything seems possible. The stories keep coming, flowing into the great river of human experience, joining the countless voices that have wondered, across centuries and cultures, what the numbers might be trying to say. There is a particular quality of light that comes just before dawn, when the darkness has not quite released its hold, but the first pale hints of morning are gathering at the edge of the world. It is a liminal hour belonging neither to night nor to day, suspended between what was and what will be. Those who have kept vigil through sleepless nights know this light well, the way it seems to hold possibility and uncertainty in equal measure, the way it invites both hope and surrender. It is in such light, perhaps, that we might best consider the mystery of 1111, this strange phenomenon that has woven itself into the fabric of modern consciousness without ever fully revealing what it means. We have traveled far in these pages, tracing the ancient roots of numerical mysticism, from Babylonian temples to Pythagorean brotherhoods, from medieval Kabbalists to New Age visionaries. We have watched the digital clock emerge and proliferate, transforming how humanity perceives time and creating the conditions for a new kind of pattern recognition. We have encountered the teachers and seekers who gave 1111 its spiritual vocabulary, and we have examined the psychological mechanisms that might explain why so many people notice this particular sequence of digits. We have listened to the voices of those who have experienced the phenomenon firsthand, who have felt that flutter of recognition and wondered what it might portend. And yet, after all this journeying, the mystery remains. It has not been solved, only illuminated from different angles, like a crystal held up to the light and turned slowly in the hand. Each perspective reveals new facets, new colors, new depths, but the crystal itself remains whole, irreducible to any single explanation. This, perhaps, is as it should be. Some mysteries are not puzzles to be solved, but invitations to be accepted, doorways that remain open precisely because we do not insist on knowing what lies on the other side. The tension between explanation and experience runs through this entire phenomenon like a river through a landscape, shaping everything it touches. On one bank stand those who find comfort in psychological explanations, the frequency illusion, confirmation bias, the brain's evolved tendency to seek patterns in random noise. These explanations are not dismissive. They reveal something genuine about how human perception operates, about the remarkable and sometimes misleading capacities of the mind we inhabit. To understand why we notice 1111 is to understand something important about ourselves, about the filters through which we experience reality, about the stories we tell without knowing we are telling them. On the other bank stand those who find meaning in spiritual interpretations, angel numbers and synchronicity, cosmic doorways and awakening codes. These interpretations too reveal something genuine, not about the external world perhaps, but about the human longing for connection and significance, about our deep-seated sense that the universe is not merely mechanical but somehow responsive to consciousness, somehow aware of us even as we are aware of it. To embrace 1111 as a sign or message is to participate in one of humanity's oldest practices, the reading of omens, the interpretation of symbols, the search for guidance in a world that often feels bewildering and opaque. What would it mean to hold both banks of this river in view simultaneously, to refuse the easy resolution of choosing one over the other? It would mean acknowledging that the frequency illusion is real, and that the experience of meaning is also real, even if these two realities operate on different levels. It would mean recognizing that an explanation of mechanism does not automatically constitute an explanation of significance, that knowing how something works is not the same as knowing what it means. The heart that leaps at the sight of 1111 is not refuted by the knowledge that brains are pattern seekers. The two truths coexist, each complete in its own domain. Perhaps the phenomenon of 1111 is best understood as a mirror, reflecting back to each person who encounters it something about their own mind and heart. The skeptic sees evidence of cognitive bias and finds their worldview confirmed. The believer sees evidence of spiritual communication and finds their faith strengthened. The uncertain find their uncertainty validated, their questions honored rather than answered. The number itself remains neutral, 4 digits on a display, meaning nothing until a human consciousness encounters it and asks, "What does this mean for me?" In this sense, 1111 belongs to a category of experiences that have accompanied humanity throughout its history. Experiences that resist final interpretation yet continue to exert a powerful hold on the imagination. Oracles and omens, dreams and visions, coincidences that seem too perfect to be random. These phenomena have always occupied the borderland between the explainable and the mysterious, the known and the unknown. They emerge in different forms in different eras, adapting to the technologies and vocabularies of their time. The digital clock is simply the latest medium through which this ancient human experience expresses itself. There is something almost poetic about this. The most advanced timekeeping technology humanity has ever created, precise to fractions of seconds, synchronized across global networks, embedded in devices of astonishing complexity, has become a vehicle for one of our oldest impulses, the search for signs and wonders. The rational and the mystical, so often cast as opponents in the modern imagination, here find themselves intertwined, each dependent on the other. Without the digital clock, the 11:11 phenomenon could not exist in its current form. Without the human hunger for meaning, the digital clock would be merely a tool, useful but uninspiring. As we stand at this threshold, looking back at the path we have traveled and forward into uncertainty, what can we say with confidence? We can say that millions of people around the world have noticed 11:11 appearing in their lives with what seems like uncanny frequency. We can say that this experience often carries emotional weight, arriving at moments of transition or intensity and leaving behind a residue of wonder or comfort or curiosity. We can say that the phenomenon has generated a rich body of interpretation, drawing on ancient numerological traditions and modern spiritual teachings, on psychological research and personal testimony. And we can say that, despite all this attention, the fundamental question remains unanswered. Is there something genuinely mysterious happening here, or are we simply witnessing the remarkable capacity of the human mind to create meaning where none objectively exists? The honest answer is that we do not know. We may never know, at least not in the way that we know scientific facts or historical events. The question itself may be malformed, assuming a binary choice between real mystery and mere illusion when the truth might be something more subtle, more paradoxical, more resistant to our categories. What we can do is remain present to the experience, attentive to its textures and implications, open to what it might teach us about ourselves and our relationship to the world we inhabit. For those who see 11:11 and feel something stir within them, this openness might take the form of gentle inquiry. What was I thinking about when I saw the number? What feelings arose in me? What might this moment be inviting me to consider? These questions need not presuppose any particular metaphysical framework. They are simply ways of attending to experience, of treating the small moments of life as worthy of reflection. In a world that often rushes past us in a blur of notifications and obligations, the pause occasioned by 11:11 might be valuable in itself, regardless of what we believe about its ultimate significance. For those who see 11:11 and feel nothing special, this too is a valid response. Not everyone needs to find meaning in numerical patterns, and skepticism is not a failure of imagination, but a different kind of intellectual virtue. The phenomenon exists for those who experience it, but it does not demand universal participation. The universe, if it is sending messages, seems content to let each person receive them or not, according to their own nature and readiness. What seems clear is that the phenomenon is not going away. As long as digital clocks continue to display the time, as long as human beings continue to seek patterns and meanings, 11:11 will continue to catch attention and spark wonder. New generations will discover it, will share their experiences on whatever platforms emerge in the years to come, will add their voices to the chorus of testimony that has been building for decades. The mystery will persist, adapting and evolving, finding new expressions while retaining its essential character. And perhaps that persistence is itself a kind of answer. Perhaps the fact that so many people, across such diverse cultures and circumstances, have felt moved by this simple sequence of digits tells us something important, not about the nature of reality necessarily, but about the nature of human beings. We are creatures who seek connection, who long for significance, who find comfort in the possibility that we are not alone in the vastness of existence. Whether that comfort comes from angels or algorithms, from cosmic design or cognitive architecture, it serves a genuine human need. And any phenomenon that speaks to that need, that offers even a moment of wonder in the midst of ordinary life, has value that transcends the question of its ultimate explanation. The clock on your wall or your phone or your dashboard will soon display 11:11 again. Perhaps you will notice it, perhaps you will not. If you do notice it, perhaps you will feel that familiar flutter, that small quickening of attention. And in that moment you will join the countless others who have paused at this threshold, who have looked at these 4 digits and wondered what they might mean. You will not find a final answer here, in these pages or anywhere else. But you may find something better, an invitation to wonder, a permission to hope, a reminder that the world is strange and beautiful, and full of questions we have not yet learned to ask. The mystery remains, patient and luminous, waiting for whoever has eyes to see. The numbers glow softly in the darkness. 1111. A doorway that is always open, a question that is always being asked. What will you do with this moment of wonder?